The last 1 year in the Nigeria oil and gas sector has been characterized by shortage of petrol, renewed attacks on oil installations and reforms in the downstream sector. In continuation of our sectoral review, our energy correspondent Olu Phillips examines the challenges and successes recorded in the sector.
Upon resumption, the president's first major move in the oil and gas sector was the appointment of the group managing director for the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, Dr. Pt.3, to replace Joseph Dawa in August 2015. Straight from his appointment, the new GMD set out to transform the corporation. In October 2015, Operation 20 Fixes was launched, which was to take care of issues like subsidy management, pipeline security, rebranding NNPC, improve investments, and more. Those processes are still ongoing. While all of this was happening, the polity was still grappling with scarcity of petrol, which started from the early weeks into the new administration. That scarcity was triggered by the suspension of importation by the major oil marketers who had outstandings from the previous administration. Days to weeks to months, the scarcity persisted. Towards the end of 2015, the federal government made up significantly to the majors. In January 2016, a price modulation mechanism was introduced, which entailed the adjustment of pump price to reflect price of crude in the international market space. Consequently, pump price dropped from 87 naira to 86 naira 50 kobo. Still, petrol scarcity persisted and characterized most part of this year until May 11th, 2016, when an announcement came.
In order to increase and stabilize the supply of the product, any Nigerian entity is now free to import the product subject to existing quality specifications and other guidelines which will be issued by regulatory agencies. Pursuant to this, PPRA has informed me that it will be announcing a new price band effective today, and that the new price for PMS will not be above 145 naira per litre.
Pump price band has been capped at 145 naira per litre. The reaction from Labour, however fragmented, clearly opposed federal government's decision. In the last few weeks, there has been an escalated cases of militancy and bombing of oil installations and critical pipelines like the Escrovos-Lagos line.
If the guys were doing that to derive benefits from the destruction, then one would say that it's vandalism. But what we have there is complete sabotage.
Experts and players in the industry have also sought for clarification over the recent price hike, demanding to know if the downstream has been deregulated. For instance, there is no provision for subsidy in the 2016 budget, so it's unlikely that the federal government will go back on the new pricing. To curb the menace of activities of the Avengers, the new phase of agitation in Niger Delta, security has been stepped up in the region, while the bombing has also continued, plunging the nation's production output low. In the last 11 months and a few days to 1 year in office, quite a bit is required, and urgently so, for the sector. For instance, industry people want contracting cycle reduced, access to assets, maintaining sanctity of contracts, and many more. The refineries still require a permanent solution. Gas infrastructure for power is also heavily challenged, though there are still some wins, like the transparency in the corporation exemplified in the monthly publication of the accounts of the NNPC. On the sides is the role the National Assembly has been dragging on, and that is the passage of the Petroleum Industry Bill. Olu Phillips, Channels Television News.
Well, joining me on the News at 10 is an energy expert, Emeka Kabogo. Many thanks indeed for coming on the News at 10. Let's take a look at President Muhammadu Buhari's administration in the past 1 year in the energy sector. What's your immediate assessment of this sector under this administration?
Well, I think the sector has experienced a lot of firefighting in the last 1 year. So the firefighting has not given enough time for clarity on the policy of the administration. As you can see, over the course of the last, say, 7 to 8 months, the downstream sector, for instance, has had a lot of shortage. And clearly, the shortages have been a result solely of a lack of clarity relating to the policy direction of the government. The liberalization of the market, which has been sought for a long time, has taken quite a bit of time coming, and in seeming to come, it's still even not very clear. So the things which has been symptomatic of this administration could be the tentativeness or prevarication as far as clear policy statements go.
So what would you consider the highest points scored by this government in the oil and gas sector? Let's begin from there.
Okay, well, I think one, it was a good idea appointing a technocrat in the person of the Minister of State for Petroleum. And some of the initiatives which have been undertaken have been salutary. For instance, one of the things which he did was to cancel outright swaps and replace it with direct swaps between the NNPC and refineries.
And how has that worked for this country?
From a policy point of view and from a value-adding point of view, the country should get much more value for its crude oil than the previous situation where you had intermediaries. So that's the primary benefit in that regard. But beyond that, we've also seen a situation where the Minister of Petroleum has had very, very strong rhetorics relating to the transformation which needs to be instituted in the industry. So in some respects, one can say that as far as planning goes, there's a lot of activity. But the jury is still out on the efficacy of the plans which are being put in place for the industry. Also, I'd say that the idea of ensuring that the market is at least quasi-deregulated as far as the downstream segment goes is a good idea. Of course, it's a very painful decision for many people, but ultimately, the market needs to be fully and completely deregulated for us to be sure of availability of petroleum products. One area where the government needs to go very, very critically and very quickly too, because while many people have been talking about the need for increased refining to guarantee availability of products, there's been a suboptimal emphasis on the determination of a refining policy. And you need a refining policy to clearly ensure that investors in refining can, with certainty, determine how their process will flow. So those are parts of the challenges which are still ahead and which need to be tackled quite quickly.
Emeka Kabogo, an energy expert, many thanks indeed for your thoughts here on Channels Television, of course, reviewing the past the administration going into 1 year of President Muhammadu Buhari. In any democracy, the executive, as one of the arms of government, is expected to work with the legislature for the development of a country. As Nigeria marks 1 year of the administration of the President Muhammadu Buhari's regime, how has the relationship between the two arms of government fared? Our correspondent, Lanre Lasisi, in this second part of our National Assembly report, looks at this and other issues.
That played out during the inauguration of the 8th Assembly was a sign of things to come. The National Assembly spent the greater part of its first year dealing with political squabbles and trying to assert its independence as an arm of government. How has this affected the relationship between the two arms of government?
You know, there's a lot one can say has transpired and is still transpiring, and a lot of people are catching up with issues. So by and large, there's a lot still to be seen in this relationship of the National Assembly and the Executive. But by and large, I can say that there has been a lot of progress.
In the face of hostility between lawmakers over leadership positions, the two chambers went on break in a bid to ease tensions. Some Nigerians believe this frequent recess affected the performance of the National Assembly this year.
That contestation is still affecting the quality of work. There are not many people who are comfortable with the Senate, for instance. Even within the Senate, it's like, let's see how this ends. And knowing that this banana peel theory, people think that it can slip at any point in time.
I believe senators are all ready and willing to, touch on their long vacation, which used to be 8 weeks, to bring it down to about 6 weeks, in order that they can catch up with some of the things that were left undone due to the frequent holidays at the beginning of the year. I think that is a matter that can be rectified, and it is being rectified.
The trial of Senate President Bukola Saraki, who was charged with false declaration of his assets, became a media sensation. Different opinions were expressed as to the intention behind the trial of the Senate President.
As far as we are concerned, the Senate President is being persecuted. I stand by that, and I can say it anywhere.
It's important that we situate it within the confines of the fact that every Nigerian public officer, no matter how highly pleased, must be ready to be interrogated and questioned within the confines of the rule of law. And that's what's happening. The most important thing is that there's a crime. The most important thing is that the institution of state that is trying that crime is not a panel. It is the courts. So if you're guilty, the courts would say so. If you are free and innocent, the court would.
The expectation from most Nigerians is that the National Assembly will get set to play its role of oversight now that the 2016 budget has been passed into law. Most Nigerians will want to see both arms work effectively together for the development of the country. Lanre Lasese, Channels Television News.
The Lagos State government has signed a memorandum of understanding with a consortium of investors to commence the construction of the fourth mainland bridge. The project will be run through a 40-year concession period and will cost 844 billion naira, including construction and maintenance costs. Joining me now on the news at 10 to get a broader perspective of this project is the Lagos State Commissioner for Works and Infrastructure, Engineer Ganiu Johnson. I want to thank you so much indeed for coming on the news at 10. Why has it taken so long for this project to be realized, even after 8 years of being proposed?
Not even 8 years, 14 years. We've been on it since during Ashwaju's time. And we've proposed so many alignments, okay, but to the glory of God, the present administration, the present governor, Mr. Akinwumi Ambode, is able to actualize that dream. The dream is now being actualized. That we've been able to agree to a particular alignment. And that alignment is what we are working on. Hopefully, within a window of about 36 months, with two contractors working from
both ends,
from the two extremes.
Where will it cover?
38 kilometers.
38 kilometers.
Right.
What areas in Lagos will this affect?
The alignment traverses from Abraham Adesoya roundabout through Ibe to Ikorodu. That is, we have some communities in Ikorodu like Odogunyo and Owutu. Eventually, it will terminate at Ojodubaja, at the northern point of Lagos-Ibadan Expressway.
Interesting. Now, this bridge will be concessioned, we understand.
Yes.
And is expected to attract tolls.
Yes.
Why do you suppose that Nigerians should be paying to use this bridge?
But since government is not funding the bridge, okay, and investors must recoup their investment, and we hope they are going to recoup this investment through tolls. We are not funding. State government is not putting a dime, a kobo into the project. The only thing we are doing is to assist, facilitate the right of way for them.
Engineer Ganiu Johnson,
Right,
thank you so much indeed for talking to us. Of course, the Commissioner for Infrastructure in Lagos State. Many thanks indeed for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you very much.
You're watching the news at 10 on Channels Television. We're switching gears now very quickly. It's for business news, and Anwar Odo is standing by to take us through.
You first. First Bank.
Hello, welcome to Business News. Oil prices hit the $50 per barrel mark today, the first time in 7 months, before retreating by 0.56% to $49.46 a barrel as disruptions to production brought a faster than expected recovery to the oversupplied market. Oil prices have now rallied in recent weeks following a string of outages, mostly from wildfires in Canada, militant attacks in Nigeria, and unrest in Libya, which knocked out nearly 4 million barrels. Investors will be watching next week's meeting of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries for signs of hike in output. However, a tussle for market share between key members, Saudi Arabia and Iran, is a concern for investors. The Nigerian stock market is still basking in the euphoria of the Central Bank's Monetary Policy Committee's decision to allow a flexible foreign exchange policy, as the all-share index rose by another significant margin today. Here is Temple Ashaju with the details.
Hello and welcome to the Stock Market Report. The bullish run at the stock market continued on Thursday as investments permeated equities on expectations around a more flexible forex policy regime. Climbing 2.18% today, the key benchmark index ended at 28,877.47 as the capitalization edges closer to 10 trillion naira. Over 100 million shares were traded on UBA, which rated the stock as the volume shocker of the day. Fidelity Bank and FBN Holdings came in the second and third places. This significant volume of trades contributed to the total 651 million shares traded in 5,796 deals for over 5 billion naira. About 50 companies made the market breadth colorful against just 6 decliners, and gainers took the lead with a 10.25% in appreciation, while Oando and Union Bank ticked 10.11% and 9.96% each. On the contrary, AG Leventis, LAN Africa and Feedsin were the top laggards of the session. And that's the stock market report for this Thursday. I'm Temple Ashaju.
Thanks a lot, Temple. That's Business News Tonight. Thanks for watching. Back to you, Gimba.
You first. First Bank.
And still ahead on the news at 10, Kogi State representatives Kwaibo Primary School and Mohammed Kabir from Kaduna lock horns in the final of the Channel's National Kids Cup.